Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I talk about all things movies, and today we're doing another film journey, and this time we have the wonderful host of Just the Discs and Pure Cinema Podcast, and also, a good friend, Brian Saur. How are you?
I'm great, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've known each other for, honestly, I think really kind of known each other the last few months, more so lately. But yeah, we have some mutual friends, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about your film journey.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and you have a wonderful YouTube channel, by the way, as well, that I know is relatively new too. Tell us a little bit about like what that is and why you started doing that.
Well, I was telling you off mic, I may have made a mistake in setting it up, but really, the idea is that, like you, I'm obsessed with physical media. I'm obsessed with Blu-rays. I used to work in a video stores for about a decade of my life. So collecting has been in my blood for a long time. And I have this podcast, Just the Discs. Before that, I was on a podcast called Off the Shelf that was part of the Criterion Cast Network with my friend Ryan Gallagher, and that was all about physical media. Like, it was literally like every week we would just go through all the releases that were coming out. We would talk about the news, things we were excited about, boutique labels. So that show really got me into this place of like a hyper awareness of what's coming out and all this stuff. And when Ryan decided to step away from podcasting, because we had done that for, I don't know, I want to say 3 or 4 years every week. Then I kind of was left with, not the shakes, but I was just like, I got to talk about physical media somehow. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't know if I was watching Pump Up the Volume or if I just had that on the brain. And I was like, what if I just did something like that, where I was like, just had a pack of discs, a pile of discs next to me. And I just, sat back and talked about it to myself, and assuming maybe someone listened, but maybe not. And then I'd sort of evolved from there, and I started figuring some things out. I taught myself how to edit audio, and I started to have guests on the show and started to include trailer clips. And that was in concurrence with Pure Cinema, which is my other podcast I do with the New Beverly Cinema out here in LA with my co-host Elric Kane. So yeah, I just sort of started from that. And then during the pandemic, I don't know what came over me in terms of the YouTube channel. I just was suddenly like, this could be fun. This could be something to do. But I think I also told you that my bandwidth is pretty full at the moment between my job and my family,
right,
and the other podcasts. I'm almost always watching.
Yeah, and always
something.
Watching movies.
Yeah, always watching something. I mean, we do get some recreational movies in there, but a lot of it is watching for shows. And I think that's, people don't always realize how much work goes into videos and podcasts, but it is a lot. And I know, as a content creator, that there's a lot involved in it. But anyway, so I just thought maybe it'd be fun to try it out. I have a weird relationship with YouTube where my youngest, my daughter, she's 11 and she watches it all the time. And it definitely made me feel old all the time, because I was like, I don't understand this YouTube. I mean, I have to say I've known about it for years, but she'll watch, Minecraft videos and stuff like that. I'm just like, I don't understand this. I don't understand.
I don't understand it.
Right? So it was always I don't want to say I had an adversarial relationship with YouTube, but I was just kind of like, you make me feel old, YouTube, and I don't know how I feel about you. But then I just thought, I'll try this out. I'm still not comfortable being on camera at all, but it's been fun to try out what's basically what I do on the podcast, which is just talking about Blu-rays.
Right.
I've done one guest spot with Aaron Pinn, our mutual friend Aaron Pinn, who is great and who makes any video or podcast easier because he's just so knowledgeable.
And he also curses things too.
In a good way. Yes. But he's great. And he is another part of the reason I'm on YouTube. Is I was starting to participate in his live streams, and I was like, okay, I get it. I get, at least for me, now I understand what people get out of YouTube. And that's the other thing that's really great about it, is there's so much there that it's like podcasts, there's a podcast for just about anything you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And YouTube's the same way. There's just like channels for all kinds of boutique interests and So I like that. I like that idea, and I decided I wanted to try and put myself out there in that way. And it was a thing where I was like, we'll see what happens with this. It's probably not going to be anything. But the channel honestly has done way better than I expected. I really didn't expect it to do so well as it's done, and it's been exciting and made me focus more on the channel than my podcasts lately. So it definitely was a thing where now I'm suddenly like, oh man, what did I do? Kind of thing.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What have you gotten yourself into? You're like, okay, well, I'll just try this, and then now you're invested in it, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely don't lose that sight of focus though. Just I guess take yourself back a little bit and make sure that you prioritize what you like, and yeah, don't put yourself too much into it. But we all appreciate it, and I know everyone who's watching this and the people in our community that we all know, like Aaron, right? Really love it, and we're thankful that you are here. So.
Well, it's very kind. It's very kind. It's been fun, and it's been neat to get to know you and other people in our community and how positive it is, which is another thing I was a little concerned about, because I know that YouTube is a much more trafficked entity than podcasts. Podcasts, I think, and it was the other thing is that YouTube and coming on YouTube made me realize how niche podcasts are, despite being very popular or having popular shows, true crime shows, what have you.
Right.
But I definitely noticed the immediate attention right away that for the podcast, it took me, I'll be 4 years in February, and it's been growing slowly over the years. But yeah, so it just, you feel like you turned on this tap of attention that you're just like, whoa, okay, I wasn't expecting that yet. You know what I mean? So,
right.
But it's like I said, it's been fun, and there's a lot of people that leave comments regularly, and that's really moving, and I really appreciate it. So, but thank you for your support, in getting on board with this thing. You definitely, watching your videos and seeing how you handle yourself has been sort of exemplary, and it's been a thing where I'm like, okay, I can do this. I see how Aaron and Nathan do it, and that's helping me, make sense of it all.
Well, I mean, as a public speaking instructor, part of my goal is at the end of each class, when the semester starts, there's always this fear that we talk about, this anxiety, because I'll tell you this, when I started this and when I started getting in front of camera, everything was real awkward, and I didn't know what to do particularly. And I'm sure for Aaron, especially because he does live stream, is like, in the middle of this very impromptu thing. But by the time the semester ends for my students, it's always nice to kind of see where maybe not just through myself, just seeing themselves build themselves up just because they've done it more and more. They just keep doing it over and over again, and seeing that confidence kind of rising within them is that's, at the end of the day, I think that's what I enjoy most about maybe this community too. I know a lot of us have different levels of version, extroversion, introversion, ambiverts and whatnot, but I love it. And I'm thankful for this platform, because there's a lot of positivity to it too, because, yeah, sure, we have some negative people in it as well, but it's very, very minute. And so, yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this whole thing.
Well, we'll just jump into this. And normally, I will say that I normally start off with the earliest memory, but I do kind of want to switch this up a little bit. And I kind of want to ask you, because of current situations with the pandemic and everything going on, what are you currently watching?
What am I currently watching? Well, like you, it's like always something for a video or a podcast. I have a stack of stuff here. I'll try and be brief about this, but it's, I get obsessed and I'll go down rabbit holes, and certain box sets will ignite something in you. Like this one in particular, the William Graffet. This is from Arrow. It just came out a couple weeks ago now, and I expected to enjoy it, but I didn't expect to get hooked on it like I have. They've put out a couple box sets, American Horror Project box sets, which are like low budget. You have some of those?
I have. It's not I'm trying to. Where is it at? Behind me. But go on. Keep talking.
Well, they've done the two of those, and they're like regional horror, low budget. Yes, good stuff. That's nice. And even the artwork looks similar in a way. But I think, and they probably have said as much, but I do believe this is sort of the unofficial third entry in that series. But instead, focusing on one filmmaker and not being just horror. William Grefé was a Florida regional filmmaker, and he's fascinating. Like, I had known about some of his films, like there's one called Sting of Death that has like this jellyfish man monster in it. And I'd known about that, but I just really hadn't dove into all the stuff he's done, because he did a whole variety. Like, so if Sting of Death is his weird take, low budget take on Creature from the Black Lagoon, then Mako Jaws of Death is his second take on Willard, which is, a story about a young man who basically has power over rats, and he basically made two movies. Yeah, no. So there's that one, and then there was a remake of Willard. But Grefé made a movie called Stanley, which isn't in this box set, about a guy who had that same kind of relationship with snakes. So then he makes Mako Jaws of Death, which is a guy who has that kind of relationship with sharks, and then Whiskey Mountain is like his Deliverance. So he's got like, he's a ripoff guy in a way, but if you listen to him, it's also coming from a place of loving cinema and things like that. So he's just a fascinating guy. Like, he's a real go-getter, and working on a low budget like he did is really impressive. But this box set is really wonderful because it has not only all those films, it also has a wonderful documentary from Ballyhoo Films from 2016, all about him, and it goes through film by film, and that's fascinating to watch too. So I've been really inspired by this, and just got gone down the rabbit hole. I haven't even finished watching all the movies, but I watched 4 or 5 of them, and we just dropped the favorite Blu-rays of the year episode of Just the Disc that we do every year, me and Stephanie Crawford. And I wish I had this before, because it probably would have been on my list. But just, but the way things go, like, you kind of have to do things early sometimes. Like, I couldn't wait for the Vinegar Syndrome titles to come, the Black Friday stuff, the Beastmaster and the Fade to Black. I know that's going to be something I'll love, but I just couldn't. I have to get stuff done a little earlier, or I'll lose my mind.
Well, it's constant rotation. There's things happening all the time, and so you can't make the list definitive. It's a little fluid, right? It's what's going on at the time, and so
absolutely, as much as I can when we record it, which is usually late November, early December. But another one that I think I did mention on the show as an honorable mention is this Essential Noir collection, which I know you'd be interested in, especially based on your channel and what I'm going to talk about next. But this one is from Imprint Films. They're a division of Via Vision, an Australian company. And they just had a gangbusters year where they put out a ton of stuff. Oh yeah, it's never been on Blu-ray before. Like A Place in the Sun, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, and
Hard 8.
Exactly, Hard 8 just came out.
Still need that, but I know it just went out of print, so I was like, damn
I think you can still get it. I want to say it's on Amazon right now.
Okay.
For like a reasonable price. So I feel like they sold out, but there's still like the trickling down of the copies that are out there. So people should jump on Hard 8 soon. I think somebody told me, oh man, what's it called? It's like a CD website. Now I'm blanking on it.
Deep Discount?
No, it's not Deep Discount. It was one of those other ones like Deep Discount. I'll think of it throughout this, and I'll.
Diabolique DVD?
No, I know that they were supposed to grab some too, but they didn't. And that's the downside to this, is that they seem to do really pretty small runs, which I understand is probably a licensing thing. It's cheaper to license a small amount than a large amount, so you have to kind of jump on them quick. But this one is still available, although pricey, and it has a bunch of stuff that's never come out before on Blu-ray. And this one, Alias Nick Beale, is actually one of my favorites in the set, and that's never been available on home video even. So that's fun. Yeah, the artwork's great. They really do a good job with the packaging. I mean, I've shown these on my channel, but they have like the nice little logo on the side. They put the year of the movie on the side, which I think is like a really nice touch that I've never seen anybody do. But anyway, this set is really great, and I haven't gotten through all of it. I still need to see Detective Story. I still need to see Garment Jungle, which is also coming as part of the
The thing you'll show in a second.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a really good set, and so I've been working my way through this in Noirvember, which I didn't do as much noiring as I normally do. Again, just podcast stuff.
You know what's funny about Noirvember? I told Daniel about this too, a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
So back when we did, after this movie did Junesploitation, which is the first time I ever did that.
Oh, awesome.
And so I had a really good time with that. But then for some reason I was like, okay, well now I need to figure out what each month thematically I could do something with, and then like October's obvious. And then I don't know what it was, but I just had a bunch of noirs piled up, because most of them are from Warner Archive. And I just I haven't got a chance to run into them yet. And there's some Kino Lorber too that I had just piled up, and I'm like, I should just watch those in Noirvember. And I don't know what it was, and I swear, this is everyone who's watching this, do not exit out of the video. I swear that I had this own idea in my mind of Noirvember. It's like, oh, that's a brilliant idea, and then I sent it to Daniel, and he's like, don't bullshit me. This is a thing that everyone's been doing for forever. And I'm just like, I may have been inspired by it, but I don't remember when that was.
Well, I love that you came to it on your own, man, because the timing couldn't have been better. Right. But yeah, like, I know you were going through this. We both happened to drop videos on the same day where we were talking about this. And this is a really incredible set. And there's yours, yes. The Columbia Noir #1 from Indicator. They are amazing. And to be honest, they don't get the credit they deserve. And so I'm going to keep bringing them up as much as I can. But this set in particular just blew me away. I mean, I didn't even get all the way through it. I got through, I want to say 4 of the 5.
Yeah,
but
you still have the Garment Jungle.
Yeah, Garment Jungle. And I started Escape in the Fog. I got to finish that. But the other ones, I think I did. Or I started Undercover Man too. Sometimes it happens too, where my movie watching time is really made up of moments, if you will. Where I'll get a spare hour in the afternoon sometimes or something on a weekend, and I'll throw something on. But mostly my podcast watching, my video recording, my podcast recording happens from 10 p.m. at night till 1 in the morning. That's when I have my free time, because my daughter's asleep and my wife's asleep. And it's this is the most unintrusive way to do this stuff.
Of course, yeah.
Point being is I'll put on a movie late at night and I'll start falling asleep, not because the movie's not good, but because
you're so tired from the day that
too late.
It's that time exactly.
But yeah, this set is really incredible. And Columbia Noir #2 looks great. And man, they just announced some Howard Hawks movies.
I know. Good God.
They neither has been on Blu-ray, and I'm a big fan of both of them. They're a lot of fun. Both The Criminal Code and 20th Century.
Yeah.
And then Things Change is my favorite David Mamet movie. So Indicator's already been killing it. And if you listen to the Just the Dis best of episode, I'm not going to spoil it, but my #1 is a Indicator release. It's just a single disc, but it's my favorite that came out this year. So they really are great, and I can't overstate that. And I know that you know the gloriousness of this. Yeah, look at you, got it going there.
I agree with
they do box sets right. They really do. Right. I think maybe the best box sets. I'm gonna say.
I agree. I think they are the best box sets. As much as I love these special. I mean, these are really
no, those are great, but those are also very rare, and they've been cranking out all these box. I'm just putting my finger going over the line of
here.
Yes,
box sets are the usual suspects, right?
Yes.
And, they're good, but maybe with the content per se, but with the packaging and the full package, if you will. And there's a lot of love into this, and some Criterion releases hardly get any extra features or anything attached to it. But I can tell that the people at Powerhouse Indicator, they really care, and I can tell.
Yeah, they recently, there's a podcast called the Indicator Cast, which is a pretty good show, and they recently dropped an episode that was an interview with the founders of Indicator, and it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating to hear where these guys came from. One of them worked at Sony. the other worked at a UK label, and how they sort of came together and what their intentions are. And even down to things like they were talking about how, they wanted, they're calling it Powerhouse, but they thought that was maybe like too gregarious a name. So they're like, what about Indicator? And then they were talking about how pH is like the pH strip. And that the pH strip can give you like this colored response. I was like, wow, that I never would have thought they went that.
I love seeing the strip. I love seeing that.
It's beautiful.
Colors. I know.
No, it's beautiful.
Like
just the way
pops on your shelf.
Yeah, I was gonna say they look great on the shelf. That alone would be a nice thing, but then on top of that, the content is incredible. So, so that's really what I've been digging into lately is these box sets, just some noir stuff, the Grafé set, and I've been having a great time with all those.
Those are fun, and as somebody who's also just watched at least part of some of those noirs, I know how much fun they are right now at this current moment, and it's really nice to dive into these sets. And but I guess moving back in time, if we're thinking about when you were a lot younger, and when I was a lot younger too, because I always love asking like our early memories of movies and our early memories of film. So do you have an earliest memory where you have of film?
It's tough because I'm old for one. So memory is not my forte anymore, but and to be honest, movies came into my life, sort of trickled in slowly over time. My parents were movie fans, but they weren't passionate movie fans. My dad liked some older movies with people like Steve McQueen and stuff like that. So I would get some classic cinema there. But we slowly as a family started to rent movies on VHS from like the grocery store, and I sort of went on my own journey there. But I think one of my earliest memories of movies in a theater is just kind of a silly memory. It's not even about the movie. It was like my dad took me and my sisters. I have two younger sisters, and then this other family that we used to hang out with a lot because my dad knew the father of that family. Like they'd gone to high school together and middle school even. So we grew up sort of hanging out with this family, and they would sometimes come over and we'd go and do stuff. So my dad took us, my sisters and I, and they had three siblings, three sisters.
It's a lot of people.
It is. He took like 6 kids to Snow White. And there may have been somebody else there, but I think it was just my dad. And I just remember that at some point during the screening, this other group of girls had sort of corresponding ages to, like, I'm the oldest in my family. The oldest girl, my friend, was a little older, like a year older than me.
Like the Brady Bunch, kind of.
Very much. It was like that. And so, like, I think it was her that got sick during this movie. Like, she turned to my dad at some point and she was like, I think I need to throw up. And so my dad, like, God, this is all I can vaguely remember. My dad got out his handkerchief and gave her his handkerchief, and she like threw up into the handkerchief. And it was a weird thing because he just took it back and put it in his pocket. And so maybe it was actually not the oldest one. Maybe it was her middle sister that had the thing, because I do remember sort of having a moment with the oldest sister going like, what? Did he not know that she just threw up in that handkerchief? Because that's pretty gross. And he just kind of went on with the movie. I don't know if it was him trying to be chill about it, to not make a scene. And I never asked him about it. So I don't, and the memory is very old, so I can't really process it.
This is making me think, does your dad still have a handkerchief?
Like he does carry it, right? He's been a guy who's had allergies and sinus problems his whole life, so he usually does carry it.
So my dad does the same thing. So my dad's from a small farming town, and he has always had a handkerchief and always used it in some way, and he's very particular about it. But yeah, like you kind of mentioned, these weird things, like, like maybe he'd be sneezing or blowing his nose and just stick it back in his pocket, and you're like, maybe that's not a very sanitary thing. Or like maybe he used to like spit in his hands to wash his hands, and very much like, oh, that was just how he was raised. Yeah.
No, I mean, the handkerchief in general is a fascinating device, if you will. It's definitely something that's interesting, especially this year. It seems like the most unappealing thing in the world to have on you, but but it's definitely something I
They're a
grew
little
up.
bit better.
Yes, those are better.
Yeah.
But I just grew up around it. But yeah, it was a weird moment, and I don't remember much from the movie at all in that case. So it's just like something that
No
occurred
wine
to me.
in the the handkerchief.
Yes, exactly.
So I guess moving on from like those early memories that may or may not be there for the films itself, but do you remember what your adolescence was when you started getting into film a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I mentioned the video stores. We had a big video store. Well, it got bigger as it went, but we went to this grocery store and they were just getting into renting VHS tapes. That's how old I am. And so they had like a decent selection, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And so I started watching movies there, just going through like just tough guys like Steve McQueen. I think, like I said, my dad was into that. So it was like that, and then Clint Eastwood and Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and such. But the other thing for me outside of the VHS stuff was we went to the drive-in theaters a lot. We had a close drive-in theater, and in, I want to say 1985 to 1987 was the most focused period. And I don't know if I'm remembering the times when we went throughout the year, if it was just during the summer. But I definitely remember seeing Back to the Future at a drive-in theater and being blown away by the idea that the movie itself was taking place in the future, because
Right.
it came out, at least where we saw it, it was sometime in October or something. It was earlier. I can't remember. But you know, they're talking about November 5th, 1955 or whatever. I'm like, whoa, and November 5th, 1985. And at the time it wasn't that yet. It hadn't become November. So I was like, whoa, this movie's already futuristic. But it was a lot of fun, just a communal thing to go to the drive-in. We'd get like a grocery bag, and my mom would fill it with popcorn and dump butter in it, and we'd shake it around and it stain through the bag and everything. And we'd have like lawn chairs and we'd sit outside the car, and it was really wonderful. And so seeing those big 80s movies like that and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I definitely remember seeing. I remember pulling out of the parking lot of the, or whatever, of the theater, and getting to that last scene where Ferris comes back, and or you know what, I don't know if I think it was just happening as we were leaving. I was like, oh no, wait, something's happening here, and we were just pulling away, and the radio was starting to crackle.
Yeah, because the radio starts like, the radio frequency that you got to turn into.
Yeah. So I just remember like that was a really big deal. You know, was one of the first times I was like, oh, you got to stay till the very, very end of a movie. You might get an extra scene or something. So yeah, going to the drive-in was a really big deal back then. And so those two were really formative things for me, I think, ultimately.
So whereabouts were you in the drive-ins? Was this in California?
No. I've only been in California since 1999. I'm a Midwest kid. I grew up outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And I think the drive-in itself was in Madison, where we went. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and my parents went there. And so Madison was like a big part of our growing up. It was, you know, we would go into town a lot to do different things. We'd go see the Capitol. We'd go hang out downtown. And so yeah, it was Madison. It was Midwest.
I was going to say I can relate to the Midwest part, because I'm from Missouri, and I'm here, and the whole notion, and there is still a few drive-in theaters. They're about 30-45 minutes away from here, at least. It's really small towns in Missouri. And then I remember going occasionally when I was in my teenage years to them, but I mean, I would always obviously go more towards the theaters because they were in town where I was, or just a little bit closer. But making me think of some of my fun experiences with drive-in theaters, and I'm really I'm happy that they're kind of coming back a little bit because of COVID, because we need movies in some kind of capacity if we can't go to the theaters, right?
Yeah, no, it's been really neat on one small level to see drive-ins get a boost. We have one where I live in California now. There's one about 45 minutes to an hour north. We haven't been able to go since the lockdown, but we've flirted with it at least 3 or 4 times. And it's definitely something that I wanted to do early with my daughter. Like I have, video of me taking her for the first, I wish I could remember what we went and saw, but it was a blast to sort of re-experience that whole vibe with a kid and with my wife. So I definitely have been really thinking about going again. It's a really, in this day and age of advanced home theater setups and 4K, it's obviously not that, but it is an interesting, communal experience and just a different way to watch movies. But it's a lot of fun.
It's almost like an uncomfortable one, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And
sitting in a car, it's not ideal.
Yeah. One drive-in theater experiences I remember was it was a double feature. I think it was one of the Disney Pixar films that I'm blanking on, but I wanted to go watch that movie. Right, this was probably around 18 years old, so over a decade ago now. And so when that happened, I remember there was another thing that came with it, and I was just with some friends, and I took my car. I had like a Ford Escape, so I had a Jeep-ish car, and that we could use the back of my car to sit in, right? And then I just remember going in the front seat and just like pulling and just going to sleep. Well, the radio was on, I was listening to the movie, but I wasn't really paying attention to the movie. So it's almost like you can, like you were saying, you could drive away whenever you wanted to. You don't have to like be there the whole time or not, because you might want to beat the crowd too to get out. Just like going to like a ball game or something, right? You want to beat everyone out. It's like, okay, I know what the score is going to be. I can go now.
Yeah, I figured out this ending. We're good.
Yeah. But so yeah, I just drive-in theaters are something that I want to start experiencing a little bit more myself. So it's really cool that you have a lot of good memories associated with them.
Absolutely.
So once you got past that, when you were in your teenage years, and what in the video stores too, when you worked in a video store, did you do this like in college?
The video store thing started back when I was in high school. I had a really good friend of mine who he was my best friend at the time, and we would just hang out a lot. We watched movies. His older brother was into movies and had some really cool stuff on tape. And at some point he got the job at this Blockbuster Video that was opening. It was a franchise store. And it was opening in Madison, and I can't remember how he even found it, but he got it first. And we had worked together. I want to say we had worked together at a fast food restaurant at some point. That was my first job. I was working at Hardee's, which was like the equivalent of a Carl's Jr.
I worked at a fast food joint, my first job too.
I mean, it's not a bad first job, to be honest. It was a fun. I mean, it can be hard and annoying, and customers can be rough, but there's a communal experience there that I found valuable in some ways. And I feel like I learned a lot just about having a job, showing up on time.
Oh yeah.
All that with that. So anyway, so he got this Blockbuster job, and he was really into it. And he was, bringing home movies and stuff. He's like, I get free rentals. And I was like, ooh, that sounds pretty neat, actually. And I was I don't want to say I was heavy into movies, but I was getting there. I was getting into it. And so I got a job at that same Blockbuster, and it was fun. It was a really fun environment. I think you said you worked at a record store. Is that right?
Yeah, I did work at a record store.
So it's the same kind of vibe. You're recommending stuff.
Yeah.
You're listening to music. In the case of our place, we were watching movies, and it was a franchise store. So we could, as I got further into that job, I ended up working at Blockbusters on and off for about 6 or 7 years. They got more corporate, and you had to play like the trailer tapes and all that crap. But at this franchise, you could play anything on the TV that was PG-13 or below.
Okay.
So we watched like a lot of Fletch. Fletch was on a lot.
Some Chevy Chase action.
Yeah, it's just a fun one to watch. So you'd put on movies, and you'd talk about movies, and you had your employee pick section, and I just really got into all that.
I love the employee pick section.
I think that for me is where the curation starts. You know what I mean? This idea of like, what is one move? Because I think we only had one pick. I think we had one section, and in later years, I would push for a full shelf. You know what I mean? For everybody. I think that gives more of a sense of like who the employees are. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, I just think that's one of my favorite things is to go into a video store and look at the staff pick section and kind of get a sense of like who works here, what are they into, and
Yeah.
I can't think of too many scenarios where I went in and looked at a employee picks or staff picks section where I didn't come away with at least one movie where I'm like, I didn't know what that was. So they were an invaluable resource. But anyway, having this idea of like, what's one movie I want to represent me, and damn it, if I could tell you what the one movie I picked was now. I definitely remember some of my employee picks from my college years because I transferred to an on-campus location later, but now I can't remember what it was. I do remember though, like we had one older manager who really loved North by Northwest.
Okay.
And I was just like, what a stuffy movie that is, you know, just like, and he would play it on the TVs and I was like, oh, this trains, what is this movie? And then I remember there's another guy who was like, I just remember knowing that he seemed like a guy, he was like somebody the third or something. And I was like, oh, he must be rich. He must come from a
yeah,
family.
because you got the names passing down, of course, any association with somebody who's like that.
Yeah, well, and then I remember his pick was The Maltese Falcon. Again, a movie that, like North by Northwest,
a little stuffy on,
yeah, exactly.
especially when you're in college, right?
Well, at that point, I was still in high school, and so seeing this first round, I was like, and I just didn't know those movies. I wasn't ready for the classic cinema yet. I'll be honest. Those two happen to be two of my favorite movies now. Maltese Falcon,
they're great. I love them. Yeah, but
at
that time, I'm the same way. When I was younger, at 18, 19 years old, I definitely didn't want to watch those movies.
I just thought that totally lined up with my idea of this guy who came from a wealthy family and watched, some, highfalutin movies or something. It was just a really stupid high school version of me that didn't understand cinema and how good it could be when you got into older movies. But I mean, not to get too long-winded about it, but basically, I think it was a big part of my adolescence was the video store job, moving to an on-campus location, still working at that job while I was going to school. But I was going to school for, biology or marine biology. I think I thought I wanted to study. And I was wrong about that. That was not the area I wanted to go to. And when I took an organic chemistry class there, I just finally decided this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. And it occurred to me that I could, actually study film. And so I took some film classes and I discovered Howard Hawks. And at the same time I was discovering, I actually have some props here. I was discovering these books from Danny Perry.
Oh, wow.
Alt movies books. He did 3 volumes of these, and he did a book called Guide for the Film Fanatic, which is still my favorite, literally my favorite book of all time. This is like there's no pictures even in this. It's literally just little essays about movies, and then there's a little checklist in the back.
Oh, I love the checklists that you can like, you can watch this now.
Yep. It's the best. But so he really opened me up because the cult movies had this mentality of putting high art and low art together. So you'd have, for instance, a review of the Maltese Falcon, and then you'd have, I'm trying to think like what's Bedtime for Bonzo is in there, for instance, but like there was some really silly stuff in here, like exploitation movies, and there's a lot of just really good movies in this first volume. I noticed things.
We got to sell those copies with the good movies first.
Well, yeah, but it was just the idea of like his mentality was that that you should always see the movie yourself. That he was going to give his take, but you should always see it yourself. But that he was sort of giving equal, page space to like a classic like Maltese Falcon and something else like a John Waters movie or whatever. And that was a really, formative thing for me, because I think I had always wrestled with, well, not always, but in college I started to wrestle a little bit with getting into classic cinema. Like I really got into film noir. I discovered Billy Wilder. I discovered, Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity. And I was like, this is the stuff. And I would come home on my college breaks and I would bring a VHS of like Sunset Boulevard and show my family and got them really excited about it. And so I was into that, but I was also still really into, silly movies, which is exactly where I am now. Honestly, I haven't really changed in that way. But the books were just so formative for me in terms of figuring out what I liked, and that it was okay to like all different things. And yeah, I just started to incorporate that into my approach to cinema. And so what I'm getting at is that the books and the classes together solidified a love of cinema that I think I had been brewing for years. And I ended up, finishing out my college years studying film, and it was amazing. It was obviously, I did better in those classes than I'd ever done in any class because I was so fully invested in them.
Right.
I became the guy in the I'm trying to think what the little quiz, the little sections that we had with the TAs, like where we talk after class. I can't remember what
like the labs.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Basically like a lab, right.
But I was the guy who's like raising his hand on every question, and I was just like, whoa, I guess I really like this stuff because I like to talk about it, So it just became a thing where it kind of, not to put too fine a point on it, but it kind of changed the direction of my life. And I decided when I graduated, it took me a little while, probably 2 or 3 years living in Madison, working at the video store after I graduated. But some friends of mine and I moved to California in 1999 with hopes to get some kind of a job in the movie industry. A very idealistic, thought process, but one that my parents surprisingly supported. And then when I got out to LA, my first job was a video store job. I worked at a DVD place. And so that was what I knew how to do, and what I knew I was good at, and I could make a little bit of money. I could pay my rent. And then eventually I started working at production houses, and I got into music supervision. And, so that movie sort of pushed me in this whole other direction in my life.
So the stuffy movies you rented from your manager, and they all kind of pointed you in the direction of where you are now. And I really like that you kind of mentioned the low art, high art kind of argument that, I want to say in one of my first media classes that I ever took, they talk about that concept very early on, just talking about, this is considered higher art, this is considered low art, not even in the context of just film, talking about radio or television or paintings or whatever that looks like, and in the arts, just in the eyes of society, I always thought it was really fascinating, especially when you wrestle with that idea when you're at that age, right? Because you have your comfort things, like you think, like, hey, Maltese Falcon, it's a little stuffy right now for what what I'm going through at this moment. Like I just want to enjoy my Fletch or whatever is going on at the time. So, but it's nice to like kind of see where we are at now and seeing that, like, hey, I love Fletch and I love Maltese Falcon, like, and it doesn't have to be equal, but just we have those phases, and it's always fun to kind of look back at that and kind of move from there.
Well, yeah, and see how some things don't change that much in terms of your taste,
Right. But this whole thing is like we're still all children,
It's true. Like, I can attest to that.
Yeah, so that's the thing I enjoy about it. So I guess, is that when you kind of realized you were into film? Was that kind of that moment?
Yeah, I think once I started taking those film classes, once I started feeling like it was legitimized in some way, like I could show my parents my grades and be like, I did really good in this. So that's okay, right? Kind of. I mean, they were very, they were just very open about things with me, which has been really helpful because they could have been a lot less supportive of all this stuff. And I could have not found a career path out of all this stuff. And so I'm lucky that I did, that movies ultimately did point me in the direction of a career I could actually call a career. But yeah, it was definitely a thing where it clicked. I was watching, I think, Rio Bravo in a class, which is probably one of my top three favorite movies of all time. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I get John Wayne now. I get how great an older movie can be. Like, I already knew that, right? But
right.
I think there was something about that movie in particular where I was just like, because if you watch that movie, I don't know. I haven't heard of too many people that were like, yeah, it was just okay. If they're into Westerns at all.
Right.
Even my wife, who's not a big Western person, like she was like, yes. And,
yeah. It's those
so
movies that click with you. It takes a little bit because you could hear, I mean, going back to our like early examples with those classics, not every classic clicks immediately with you, but when is something that kind of you would objectively know that that's good.
Yeah.
And then subjectively you're like, oh wow, I actually really did enjoy that. So it all makes sense. And Rio Bravo for you. I mean, I love it too. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I love that those moments. They're very rare when you get those movies.
Well, and to take a class on film and understand this is an academic approach to entertainment, I just really hadn't thought about. I mean, I thought about films as art, but when you started breaking down, like, well, look how he doesn't have any dialogue in the opening sequence of this movie, and how the storytelling still comes through crystal clear, and the artifice of it all, and just how the director is pulling it off. It really made me just go, wow. I think that was when I was already aware of directors. I was aware of Stanley Kubrick. I was aware of Scorsese. And those guys can be a little flashier in some ways. But Hawks was just nuts and bolts. And he always shot his films in a certain way. He didn't use a lot of close-ups. He had like a specific medium shot type setup that he used a lot. And I was like, wow, you can still do all these stylish things in another way. It just made me aware of style and approach and just how much thought goes into all these movies, and that it is really one of the great art forms of all time, So I think that's when it's really started to click.
Well, I mean, it just shows you all those voyeuristic tendencies that you start paying attention, because in the academic setting, which is interesting because I come from that too, maybe in the communication side of things. And I took a few film classes, but just for fun, because I love film, And I think it's interesting when you can approach things in different levels, right? So entertainment purposes, for objective or subjective purposes, for escapism or whatnot. But even in the academic sense of really kind of pulling apart and like looking at different things and thinking about elements that you would never think about before, and how that colors the way you experience it now. For better or for worse, I think I just recently had one of the film journeys. I can't remember who said this, but they're talking about like, well, maybe I pay attention a little too closely to some of these things, and it kind of takes me away out of just like enjoying the movie sometimes, which I think is interesting, because we watch so many films, all of us in this community, and we all look at it from a different angle. We all have our own perspectives and stuff, but it is interesting that we can all kind of watch the same thing and have different aspects to talk about it.
Yeah, no, and there is something to the idea of when you first approach it academically, it can screw up your viewing. Like I remember somebody telling me as soon as they learned about editing, that for a long time they would just see cuts, and they'd be watching a movie and just be like, cut to themselves, cut, and how that became distracting in a way. And I get that. I've actually gone through that and gone past it now. But one thing it's been fun doing, I mean, one of the great pleasures of my life is sharing movies with my kids, my son and my daughter. And my daughter in particular is really taken to movies. I mean, she's going through a phase now where everything dad likes is initially terrible. But that's to be expected. But she also has really started to understand storytelling, the mechanics of it, the types of stories. Like she can look at it and go, oh, this is that kind of thing. I bet this will happen. But she also started to pay attention to transitions. Transitions is a big thing. She's just like, Dad, that was a really good transition. I'm like, yep. And just the idea that certain filmmakers pay attention to those things. They pay attention to transitions and how that really is an incredible detail that when somebody's doing it right, it elevates a good movie to a great movie. And I love that those little things start to stick out as you go. And the academic isn't all making it not enjoyable anymore. It's actually making you appreciate it more, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that your daughter is going through, not the phase of everything that dad likes is is a little bit corny, but that's just the natural. I feel like the evolution of being a dad. So
Yeah.
that just happens, right? But yeah, that's wonderful that's you can see that transformation in her as well, and I hope she can pass that on to her children as well.
Me too.
But I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm thinking about, so those are some good things going on, but what are some bad movie memories that you have?
I had to think about this a bit because I don't have a ton of bad movie memories. Like I don't have a ton of experiences where seeing a movie had some negative connotation to it. Like I know that sounds strange because we've all had bad experiences with stuff. But I really did have to think about it because I've been lucky in that, I've heard some horror stories about going to the theater with people on their phones and talking. And I mean, it sounds like there's some areas where I can see why people would just stop going to the theater outside of all this mess because it becomes unpleasant when it's distracting and it's ultimately taking away from this communal experience that you want. So the only one I could remember is that when we went to see The Green Hornet, the Seth Rogen movie.
Oh,
which isn't a great movie or anything, but we went to see it, and it was my wife and I think my son and I, and we were sitting high up, higher than we usually have to sit because I think it was opening weekend, and it was really crowded. And in the row in front of us, I can't exactly remember what went down, but it was basically like a guy and his son and this dude and his girlfriend on a date. And something happened where the dad and the dude started to get into it over, I think it was like the kid was talking maybe, or I don't know what happened. Maybe the guy was like, hey, can you shut your kid up? Like, I don't think he was that rude about it, but it felt like the tension was getting there. And they actually came to like loud words. And it got really, like, it was one of those things where like you couldn't help. You can usually put that aside and just focus on the movie, but it was like right in front of us. And so we really couldn't. And so it got to a point where like the dude was challenging the dad basically to a fight in the theater. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to go well. So the dad has to get up, leaves, comes back with the management. The management is in there, and it's this whole thing. And now you're just like, oh my God, okay, I can't watch the movie at all.
Watch the movie right now.
I mean, we got a refund or whatever, but there was a weird tension that I always hated about, engaging rude people in theaters, because you just never know where they're coming from, how far they're willing to go with it. And it's
you want to get in the fight?
Yeah. I mean, they might fight you for all you know. And so I'm just like, it's just so distracting, even for me. Like I think that the tension of like, and I hate to single out young people, but sitting next to a younger person in a crowded theater at the beginning of a movie, and they're on their phone, and you're just like, okay, it's just the trailers. We're okay. It's fine. Hopefully they'll put it away. And then you kind of see you're getting 3 or 4 trailers in and they're still on the phone. You're like, okay, hopefully they're really maybe they're just that person who's really like, the trailers are my time still. And I can't bitch. I mean, I like to enjoy trailers without interruption, because that's kind of part of my business is trailers and stuff.
Yeah.
But I get that that's not everybody's thing. So that tension of like, will they put it away? Won't they put it away?
And then, you don't want to tell them like, hey, could you?
Not before the trailers are over. I feel like for me, it's like you can't expect everybody to have that reverence for advertising that you have,
True.
But that tension of like, oh, is this going to be, am I going to have to move? And then I used to do a thing where I would like find a way to like kind of block my vision, just like do some of this stuff, So I'm just like, okay, I can now, even if they don't put it away, I can't see them. So I'll be okay. So anyway, that tension of like, is this going to go well? I always hated, because it would distract me as the movie was starting. And I always like to pay attention to the beginning of a movie. How, like Rio Bravo, like how does this director choose to start their film? Like that's important, setting the tone.
You have to get sucked into the world, and especially when something like that's distracting, that it takes away from that. And that's, I get that.
I mean, thankfully for me, again, like the theaters out where I live, we're about an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles, and people like movies here. I mean, obviously nobody's going to movies here right now, but they don't, we would just go at off times. We would go not on Friday or Saturday night. And even when we did, it wasn't that bad, knock wood.
Right.
It was mostly, I got to do it just because in case. I don't know when I'm going to go to a theater again, but just to not jinx it. But so those bad experiences that I've heard so many people having with people texting and stuff, I haven't had as much of that. And so for the most part, my experiences have been positive. So that was really the only thing that came to mind in recent memory was this near fight breaking out in Green Hornet.
It's interesting that you say that because I used to go to the movies before this whole thing happened, probably 2 or 3 times a week, maybe.
Nice.
Which was really, really great. But I also didn't have a significant other, a family, or anything like that. So it was cost effective. It was fine for me. I could do it. But I will say I went on off times, right? Or I went to movies that not everyone would go watch at a certain time. And so I have not really had terribly too many bad experiences myself, but in theaters. And I'm also that same person who I don't really want to tell somebody to do something because I hate altercations. I don't want to be a part of it because I'm always wanting people to be okay and like happy and like just there's no problem with anything. But that's not life sometimes. But yeah, sometimes you have to like do this or distract yourself away from that. So yeah, I don't know. I miss movie theaters though.
Oh, I do too, man. I do too. I'm just now sort of coming to realize it, as much as like we just watched Freaky, over the last couple days. And that's a movie. I mean, there are definitely some movies recently where I've been like, I was fine seeing this at home. Freaky would have been fun to see with a crowd because it's a super fun slasher comedy switch movie.
Mm-hmm. I watched it by myself, so I definitely didn't have as much fun.
Yeah, no,
it
was at least watching it with my son and my wife. We had a good time, because we were into that kind of movie and the genre expectations therein. But I know with the crowd, it would have been a lot more fun, and I know it would have performed well in a theater. So it is kind of sad when you think about that stuff. But ultimately, like I said, most of my theatrical experiences have been positive.
Well, I'm glad that movies have always been a relatively positive thing and have not caused any altercations in your life. You've been around some of them,
Yes.
Which is good. So I guess transitioning away from the bad experiences, thinking about currently where you're at right now with film. Do you have a current favorite film that you have always enjoyed or like are enjoying right now at this very moment?
I mean, it's, that's always a tough question. I'm sure as for you, like, what do you say about that at any given moment? But like I said, I mean, I think Rio Bravo is a big deal to me. If I had to be honest, John Carpenter's The Thing is probably number one. Like for me, that's a 10 out of 10 movie. It's just incredible. And I know that that's a movie a lot of people like. So it's not an uncommon answer, but the more I watch it, the more I'm just like, nope, I can't poke any holes in this. For me,
yeah, it's perfect. No,
the tension,
it's my favorite horror movie of all time.
It's so good, and I'm excited for when I can show my daughter that movie because I think she'll like it. But it's just Carpenter. He's one of those guys. I know a lot of people like him, and a guy who is influenced by Rio Bravo, a guy who loves Howard Hawks, a guy who made Assault on Precinct 13 as kind of a response to Rio Bravo or an homage. But you just need to see a filmmaker responding to another filmmaker and taking in the old techniques and, making it his own and just making some incredible genre movies, out of that. So Carpenter is a really incredible guy that has always been a big deal to me. I've seen most of his films, when I was much younger, but that's one that I've bought.
Multiple formats. How many times?
I think almost every format. I've had it on VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, several times on Blu-ray. Is it on 4K yet? I can't remember.
Don't think it is.
Yeah, okay, so it's not.
I'm
there.
actually still contemplating getting that Arrow release of it. I don't have it yet, which is something. I mean, I have the Scream Factory behind me, but
Yeah, that Arrow is really the one. I mean, the Scream is great too. Don't get me wrong. I love them both. I have them both.
Hmm.
But yeah, that Arrow set is pretty epic. Yeah, no, I mean, so but that one I've just come back to the most, and uh, I just think it's like I said, it's really a perfect movie for me. I think besides that, Rio Bravo, and then there's a W.C. Fields comedy called "It's a Gift" from 1934, I want to say. That is probably my favorite comedy, and it's just like The Thing and like Rio Bravo. I can watch it over and over, and it still does what it's supposed to do. It still makes me laugh out loud to
Hmm.
myself, and I've seen the movie, dozens of times at this point. Not dozens, but probably a dozen to 15, 16 times.
Right.
It just still works, and there's something about that, especially a comedy, and I'm a big fan of comedies, especially now. That But there's certain ones where you're just like, okay, it's not gonna
Not
ever be,
hitting.
yeah,
Right.
it's not gonna be like it was the first time.
Oh yeah.
But there's certain things about WC Fields' comedy, which is often based around people annoying each other, that I think, especially in the pandemic right now, it's hard not to respond to that kind of comedy.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually just recently watched My Man Godfrey for the first time,
Oh, so
and
good.
I loved it. And you speaking of that time period and those slapstick moments, or just not even not even always slapstick, because I guess it's more like those situational annoyances that you give each other, which I've really recently discovered in these 30s films, and screwball comedies, I guess, would be a much better way to describe it. But I'm enjoying the ride, so I got to add that one to my list.
Yeah, WC Fields is definitely worth your time if you like Screwball. He's not quite the same energy level as some of those Screwballs, but I mean, I love that stuff. I love My Man Godfrey. I love the Preston Sturges stuff. I love the Hawks Screwballs from that period. They're all a lot of fun to me.
I just saw the Lady Eve for the first time too. Speaking of
Oh, one of
Sturgis,
my
yeah,
that's another one of my favorite comedies, honestly.
it's fantastic. And ever since the when the arrival of on the boat, getting hit on the head with the like that yeah, just it immediately sucked me. I was like, yep, this is gonna be great. I already know.
Yeah,
So
and Sturgis is great too because, like a lot of directors, he has his own stock company of actors. Like Bill Demarest shows up, and he's from My Three Sons. For people that remember that show, but he's super funny in all of Sturgis's. Have you seen Christmas in July?
no, I still haven't.
I'd be
I
curious what you think of that. That's one I'm going to probably bring up on one of my podcasts soon because I think it's on Blu-ray, and it's actually got a really nice commentary from Sam Deegan, who I'm a huge fan of, who I had on just recently. But I think that's another one of those comedies. It also has Bill Demarest, which is why it made me think of it. But he's Preston Sturges is just, I mean, he's incredible. Also, like Carpenter, just a well-oiled machine of a filmmaker who could just crank out these comedies and be clever and subvert the production code.
Mhm.
And he's just brilliant.
Isn't it interesting that, like, thinking about like your films that you've enjoyed over the years, and currently too, and you can just put them on all three of those films with the Rio Bravo, The Thing, and thinking of all those films, you can just put them on at any time and still enjoy them. And I find that really fascinating, especially with this whole thing that I'm doing with the film journey. I really love talking to everybody and seeing where their headspace is with the films that they grew up with, or even if it's a film that they currently enjoy, because some people can't even pick a favorite film because everything is so fluid with it. Like for me, and for my instance, like my go-to answer is Lord of the Rings, because I just have so many memories attached to those films. And it's actually just talking about them yesterday, because I talk about them probably once a week in some kind of capacity. But I love that films can do that for us, is that there can be something that's like subjective to us and our journey, and hopefully in the future when we have kids or nieces or nephews or whatever, they can also have theirs, and you can kind of see where their headspace is at. And I'm really excited about that, for my prospect in the future, just like kind of seeing like, okay, well, who are the people that are around me? Like, did I influence anything at all, or did they come up to their own conclusions on things? I'm really curious to know.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing to get to know people and get to know what they like and share with people. And you bring up Lord of the Rings. I mean, those are great films for sure. Interestingly, my son, he's 21 and my daughter's 11. They have a long gap between, he's actually my stepson, but he loves those films like you do. And he actually just went through this whole phase of getting my daughter to watch all three of the originals. And it was really adorable for me because I've shared movies with him. I've known him since he was 6 years old. And I showed him the Marx Brothers, who I love. And, I showed him Jerry Lewis and some other things that he came to really enjoy. But it was super neat to see him sharing with her, completely independent of me. Like, I wasn't even watching with them, and I would have, but it was really more of a thing where I was like, this is his thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was absolutely heartwarming to see him get excited about sharing with her and her get excited about those movies because they're good movies. And she's into fantasy and science fiction and all kinds of stuff that would fall under that umbrella. So that's been a recent thing in the house. So it's nice to hear that you're a fan too.
Well, that's heartwarming. Honestly, I can't wait to get to those moments where, like you said, you don't have to be involved per se on that whole thing. You can kind of see people around you and get inspiring other people. And I think at the end of the day, which is something I say a lot. I say a lot of phrases in my videos, but this is something that I really do feel that with each of these film journeys, but also with each story that I hear from different people, I get excited every single time I talk to somebody about movies, because obviously it's a passion of mine, but at the same time, it's a passion of everybody who's watching this and everybody who's sharing their stories. And yeah, that's why this community is so positive, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it too, man. It's great to see it.
Which I guess that makes me think, so currently right now, this is overall in a general perspective, what would films mean to you at the end of the day? What would you say currently that films mean?
Films mean to me. Oh boy, that's tough, man. I mean, they're kind of my everything, really. I mean, outside of my family, it's the next most important thing to me. Um, More important in some sense than my work. We were talking also off mic about how things that we love are kind of our hobbies, but they really take over in a way, like they become all consuming. And film is really just, it's an incredible outlet for me in terms of finding and enjoying things and feeling emotions, and just continuing to discover movies. Like, just the idea that it's not really a topic that you can conquer,
Yeah.
that it's the kind of thing where you go in knowing that I could spend my whole life and I'm not going to be able to see everything.
Yeah.
And there may be some people who think that they can, or that they did or will, and that's fine if that's the approach they want to take. But
Good
really,
luck.
to me, yeah, I know, I was gonna say, but to me, it's much more about like, it just is the gift that keeps on giving, just there's no end in sight. And there's so many avenues that I've seen a lot of movies, but there's still so much, for me to see, so much foreign cinema that I still need to dig into. And I have definitely, dug into that thing. But it's a great time to be a movie fan with physical media and boutique.
Absolutely.
I know you've definitely brought this up, but it's like, in terms of, the care and the availability of movies between physical media and streaming, and the Criterion channel. I mean, you could learn so much from just one streaming channel, or two or three giant box sets like your Fellini set or your Agnes Varda set back there. I mean, these are incredible resources that I didn't have access to way back. And so I'm really kind of excited about it, and I'm happy to see that a lot of people have been, maybe not in a way that they are excited about in terms of being quarantined, but they've been able to use movies therapeutically to help them get through some horrible times like this.
Yeah.
That's been the case for me. So I've always found them as kind of a lifeline. And I think, as I told you, they help structure me. My job and my family do that, but movies also are a structure for me to sort of hang things on. I have to watch this for this show, and it really kind of helps keep you going. That the idea that you're going to discover a new movie, like in the William Grafé collection, just discovering new movies that I didn't know existed, really. That kind of experience, when you keep having it over and over again, is so pleasurable and so fulfilling that they just want to keep that going always.
Yeah.
So it's really a big deal to me.
Well, I love that lifeline analogy, because I think that rings true for a lot of people. So I can't think of a better way to, put it into words. So I'm thankful for your journey, and I'm glad that it's continuing, and I'm glad that everyone is continuing on their own journey here, as we, just are currently in our situation where we do need these things, especially with the world around us at the moment. And even when the world is relatively normal, I think it's in something that you kind of take for granted, right? And you realize, like, oh, what was I missing? I'm missing the theater experience, or you're missing that communal aspect of being around other people and making sure, like, oh wow, this is, it could be something blockbustery like the new Marvel film that you could watch, which, I love Marvel films, and I usually go opening night to those things, and I always enjoy my experience because there's this is crowd involvement, which is something I don't get at home, when I'm watching like a Fellini film or a Bergman film, that like maybe me and my friends who are watching this right now, we love it, but not everyone, is going to go and have the same experience. So I love it. And I'm glad this journey is continuing for all of us.
It's a great journey, and it's a great thing to share with people, online or wherever.
So where can everybody find you?
I am pretty active on Twitter. I have like 2 or 3 accounts there. My personal account is Bob Freelander. Then I have a Just the Disc Pod account for the Just the Disc podcast and the YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel is just, you can look up Just the Disc YouTube and it comes up. And then Pure Cinema Pod is the Twitter for the other show. And then on Instagram, I have a Just the Disc Pod Instagram, a Pure Cinema Pod Instagram, and we use those pretty regularly too. I think those are the main two. A little bit of Facebook, but not really. Mostly Twitter and Instagram is where I can be found. And of course, in the comments section on the videos, I try to be pretty on top of my comments. If you leave a comment or have a question, I try to respond to that stuff in a timely manner.
I'm trying to get that way too.
It's hard. It's really hard.
It's getting really hard. Yeah. Especially just, with all the, family, movie watching other people's content. It's a lot, but at the same time, it's a labor of love.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I'll be putting all those links in the description down below. So everyone listening right now, check out Brian. He does fantastic work all over the place, and it's really wonderful to finally be able to speak to him. Do you have any final thoughts to say about this whole thing?
Just keep watching movies, find the ones that you love, and maybe find somebody that can help you curate them, whether it be a YouTube channel or, a cult movies book or something like that. I think if you're in a place where you feel like a little listless about movies, which I could totally understand in a year where you've been, no, you're not forced to watch a lot, but you've found yourself doing that a lot, you could burn out. I think there's ways to reinvigorate your passion by finding another person that's passionate about it, or some kind of a gateway to curation, whether it be even something as simple as going and looking at a repertory theater's programming. Like what did they do? Like the New Beverly, for instance, obviously is one I'm near and dear with. And if you go to their website, you can look at the old calendars. And Quentin Tarantino is the programmer of that theater. So if you need somebody to inspire you, he can certainly be an inspiring presence. So if you look at like the calendars for the last 3, 4, 5 years, they have them all cataloged. They have double features, triple bills. Like you could start with something like that, or maybe you have a local repertory theater that keeps track of their old programming, or a video store. I don't know how easy or difficult it is to rent videos. I don't have one, unfortunately, near me right now, but places like that, I mean, just get yourself inspired. But I do think there's a lot of podcasts and YouTube channels out there that I find inspirational and that really get me excited about movies, even when I'm already excited. So
Right. Yeah.
that's what I would probably recommend.
Well, I mean, yeah, to echo what you said, I think this is the reason why I do this. And this is the reason why I like talking to everybody on this platform, is because I do find inspiration from these conversations and from other people's content and what they're watching currently. And going back to like when I worked at the record store, when you worked at the video store, hopefully we can get back to those days a little bit, in the near future, where we can have some kind of person that we would maybe look at like, oh, well, they might be slightly expert. They have the slight expertise on this particular thing that I don't really know much about. So like Aaron, for instance, is somebody that, as a mutual friend of ours that has an abundance of knowledge on Severance and B movies that I don't really understand yet. And I'm still, dipping my toes into that content and like Vinegar Syndrome or whatnot. And, these are things that I'm still discovering on my own, and I'm along for the ride. So I'm excited.
It's like I said, it's a great time to be a movie fan.
Well, I want to say thank you so much once again, Brian, for joining on this film journey. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. I had a lot of fun, and let us know down in the comment sections, because we'll both be reading it and kind of just seeing what your thoughts are on Brian's journey, and also maybe sparked some of your own thoughts on some memories that you might have had at the drive-in or the movie store, right? Tell us down in the comment section down below. And thank you so much once again, Brian, for joining me. And thanks everyone for watching. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Give it a like, share it, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.